I've done quite a few videos on wrapping cabochons, but this one is for a very small cabochon. I wanted to show you, I have this gorgeous sunflower bumblebee jasper from Charmer's Gems. Isn't it a gorgeous colour? And it's the stone originates, I think, from West Java in Indonesia, which is where I lived for a little bit. So I'm going to show you with 0.8 and 0.4, I'm going to make the framework. So I cut 3 pieces of 0.8mm wire and I bind them at the center point with the 0.4. So the binding is just at the center point, and then I'm going to bend it into a circular frame to sit at the base. I used my ring stick, in fact, to start that shaping, just to get it sort of curved, but you can use anything that's cylindrical, and you just tape it from the outside of the binding to the base of the stone, and that's going to start the frame. So most of the cabochon frames I make do begin like this, but this one's only going to have one binding at the base. And you can see how you need that masking tape to hold it, because the whole thing is so difficult, especially when it's very small. It's very difficult to hold, use your tools and wire wrap it. So once you've got it, the binding in place and the masking tape on, you push those 3 wires around the outside of the stone and then bend a kink at the very, very top where you want it to meet, where you want to make the bail. So do that on each side. Just push the wires around the stone and then bend them away right at the top where they meet. And then you can use a little bit of 0.4mm binding wire to secure the top of those wires to complete the frame. So this is just to hold it. I can put masking tape, a slither of masking tape there as well, but that's just a bit more bulky, and the wire is just easier because it's small, it's delicate. You can put wire on top of that and no one will see it. It's just a sort of like a hidden stitch, if you like, to hold everything in place. So something this small is always quite difficult, to work on initially. But once you get the frame made, you'll find it much easier. So just wrap that around nice and tight to bring those wires together at the top. And once you feel it's secure, you don't have to go mad, it's just a little bit of binding. Once you feel it's secure, you can cut the little excess ends off. But make sure that those 3 wires are sitting parallel and in a row. You can see it's just held in by the tape, but otherwise those 3 wires are sitting together. Now you want to just pick out the back wire and just pinch them together with your fingers like that, and that means the stone can't fall out of the back. And then do the same for the front. So you just pinch the front 2 and just try and grip them and bring them together a little bit. You don't have to spend too long on this at this point. You can come back and rearrange those wires in a bit, but at this point you just want to hold the stone in place so that it cannot fall out. So there, it's now held in place at the top, the back, the front. And now you can concentrate on making the bail. So I'm just going to cut off that little bit of excess binding wire, and I'm going to use one of those projecting wires to wrap around over that binding wire, so that hides it underneath, and that will now give it a nice bit of security. And if you've got enough wire, just wrap. If you've got a pointy stone like me, just keep wrapping until the point of the stone at the top is also covered, because that will also secure the stone inside the frame. So there we have a binding at the top. So now everything is nice and secure. And now you've got the other wires to play with. You'll need 2 to make the bail. So just look at how they protrude out and just keep 2 at the center for the bail, and the other 3 are going to be decorative. So we're going to now concentrate on those 2. So that's for the top bail. And we're going to use 0.4 to bind around those 2 wires to make them into one. We're not going to weave them, we're just going to bind around. Because this stone is so small that if you made a woven bail, it would sort of be out of proportion to the stone. It would take away from the beauty of the stone. So I'm going to get a long piece of 0.4. I'm going to leave a little bit of an end before I start wrapping. And then I begin by just wrapping around and around those 2 projecting wires at the top of the stone. So you can see it's just binding it around and around. Once you've done a few binds, just scooch them all down, press them all down, and make sure there's not big gaps between the binding. You want it as neat as you can get it. So, and you can press it down to flatten it, and once you've got it started, you can hold it with your flat nose or chain nose like I'm doing, and that helps keep the wires parallel and flat as you bind. And you can just keep moving your pliers up as you bind and keep scooching the wires down. And once you've really got the binding started, you can use the end of that wire then to bring everything down and just tighten that end around the top of the stone, and that means it won't sort of travel up and slip up as you're binding. So you carry on binding much further up. So you bind to about, well, 3 centimeters, about an inch, and it's not 3 centimeters, it's 30 mil, about an inch and a quarter, something like that. Depends how big you want a bail, really. And then leave a tiny bit of wire at the end, just enough to make 2 circles, which you're going to do in a minute. So now you've got this, flatten out this is your going to be made into the bail. And sometimes what I do is I just tap it down with a hammer, because it won't then, if it's a flat bail, it's just easier to make it, turn it into a loop. So I'm just gently tapping, using both sides of the steel and the nylon, but not going mad. It's just, work hardens it and just takes away the flexibility. So next thing to do is to get your bail makers to create the loop or the bail. And so you push it forward first to the front, and then bring the loop to the back. With those little ends, what you want to do is use the tips of your round nose pliers and create little circles at the very end, because you don't want scratchy ends. So make tiny little circles, and these little circles can be, if you sort of just bend them to a right angle so that they're sitting flat like that, and then just bend them up. If you bend them up, then when you finish making your bail, they can sit flat at the base, or the back rather, of the stone. So you put your bail makers in, and if you don't have bail maker pliers, you can use a pen or a pencil, anything cylindrical. See, and you just push the whole of that loop together so that it forms the bail at the top. So I'm just taking off the projecting binding wire there, but I've kept my weaving wire. That's my weaving wire, and I'm going to use the end of that weaving wire to bind around where the bail, the loop meets. So bind around where it meets to create that looped bail. If you have run out of wire, because you've used it all with the wrapping, you just cut another piece and add it at this stage. So you can always add more. It's never a problem. So bind it around. Once it feels nice and secure, get rid of the ends, and then just spend a bit of time sort of neatening up everything. So there's the bail, the woven bail. And next thing is to do something with these projecting wires. So one of them, I'm just going to cut this one down. I'm going to make a spiral to sit at the front of my piece that hides any messiness, you know, at the top of or under the bail and at the top of the stone. So I'm just going to curl the wire into a spiral, bring it in towards the top of the stone, and before it touches the stone, I'm just going to lift it up, put it on the edge of my block, and just give it a little bit of a hammer on the edge of that wire, and that work hardens it and spreads the wire and just gives it a sort of a different sort of look. And then I can bring it and flatten it right at the top of the piece that I've made. So there's my center. And then with the rest of them, you can just free flow anything you want to do. So you can make a little bit of a loop. And if you don't want to do this sort of freehand, you can always use your round nose pliers, your bail making pliers, you see, to make these loops and circles and whatever you want to do. So I'm just hammering the edge of this loop. Also, this work hardens it, makes it sit sort of nice and firm, and it gives a nice flattened look on the outside. So I'm going to wrap the rest of the wire around and bring it back to the front, and then with the very end I could make another little circular spiral there that can sit on the front of the stone. So I mean, this really, what I'm doing now is completely freestyling with these wires. Anything goes. Every time I would, you know, wire wrap the top of a stone, it depends how the wire is sitting, what comes into my head, how the wire wants to flow. So this is another one I do. I tend to curl it around and around, and I feel this would suit something called bumblebee jasper, because you could just imagine it, the bumblebee sort of flying around and around, so it's sort of curling around. That's just the way my brain works, I'm afraid. And then because I want it to come and sit in the front, I can actually put the end through that little loop that I made and make another spiral. So again, if you know, whatever comes to your head or comes to your hand, whatever the wire dictates, you can end up putting spirals at the back, at the front. You can add more wire, put more spirals, but you never want to take too much away from the beauty of the stone. So, you know, you can get really carried away, which I am doing at the moment. But I just want to show you how, you know, every time you make one, it will look different. So there we are, just curling it around, and that will leave another, I'm using up all the wire that I've got, another little spiral that can sit. I can actually just get the outside of it to be hammered. Again, it gives it a nice bit of work hardening, and also that flattened look, you know, on the round wire looks great. Just gives it a sort of a bit of depth. So there we have it. Now we can take off that masking tape, and my binding has slipped a bit. I'm just going to see if I can very gently push it back into place. There we go. We can squeeze it and keep it, get back more central. And then I'm just going to spend a little bit of time getting those front and back wires looking a bit better. Don't use the steel on your stone. Just put a bit of masking tape, or if you've got nylon jawed pliers, you can always use them. But I put a bit of masking tape on my flat nose pliers, and then that way I don't scratch the stone when I want to, you know, just move those wires on top of the surface of the stone. So it's just my little trick to make sure I don't scratch the surface. So spend as long as you want until you're happy with it. And all this also, you know, makes the wires stronger and flatter and takes away the elasticity. But literally, that's it. So have fun wrapping small cabochons in this way, and thank you for watching.